You're only going to be as happy and successful as you believe you deserve to be. And if you're hard on yourself, if you think you're a bad person, or if you think you don't deserve things, you are going to self-sabotage things that can help you grow, make you learn, bring joy into your life. You've got to love yourself. You've got to appreciate yourself if you expect to have good things happen.
Welcome to Be Bold Branding, where we discuss the power of differentiating yourself through your own unique story and standout personal brand. How do you go from living in a treehouse and playing in a band to one of the most iconic motivational speaking companies in the world? Today's guest blew us away when we first heard his story. He's Gary Chappell. He's recently retired CEO of Nightingale Conant, the world leader in personal development for over 50 years, and still going, as far as I'm concerned, super strong. Today, he's sharing with us the 4 valuable lessons he's learned in life, in addition to the story of how it all came together.
Mr. Gary, welcome to Be Bold Branding.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be here.
Okay, we have our intro, and then we like to learn a little bit of a background to our guests on our podcast. I'm excited to hear about the treehouse story and the background that led you to CEO of the company.
Okay, well, before I jump into the treehouse story, it really is preceded with probably the most valuable thing I've ever learned in my life, and we'll talk a little more in detail about it. But I was living in Houston, Texas in the late 70s, and my sister, she came across this book that was teaching her things I thought were very cult-like-ish. And she said, Gary, you know how we were taught to judge, to protect ourselves from, differentiate between people that, want to do harm versus want to help us? And I said, well, of course, we all do that. And she said, well, this book says that that's not true. The judgment's a bad thing. And, I pondered that for a while, and it really made me nervous. I thought she was being drawn into a cult. So I slept on it. And the next morning I made the proposal to her. I said, hey, sis, how about tomorrow you and I make a pact? Let's go through the day and not judge anything. According to what you're saying, there'll be some benefits from that. And she goes, absolutely, I'm 100% in. And so we made that pact, and I'm an honest guy. I like to be, I like to think I'm an honest guy, and I believe I am. And so I committed to that, and I was determined I am not going to cheat. I'm going to, if I catch myself judging, I'm going to stop myself. And so I think I was probably in my late 20s at the time, and I started that day out. And by the end of the day, I experienced the first day in my life where I was happy all day long. And I'm one of 7 kids. I'd had many great moments of happiness, but there was always some conflict that showed up in my life. And so during the course of that day, I learned an extremely valuable lesson. And not only did it impact me so much during the course of that day, I decided to keep on it. So I was able to maintain absolute non-judgment for a full week. And it taught me the lesson that I think has carried me through my life in a way that's been almost miraculous. I would not have advanced at Nightingale Conant had it not been that lesson that I learned, that judgment hurts us. It helps us. It stifles our thinking. It stifles relationships. There's nothing positive that came out of that. So after the week was over, something came up. I can't even remember what it was, but I came crashing down. But I never forgot the emotional impact. It was literally a blissful week. And so that was something I was determined to maintain and work on for the rest of my life. I caught myself judging constantly, and I always made a point to, okay, I'm judging, how is this helping me? It never did. So anyway, year and a half later, I found myself moving back to Florida, and I was living in a treehouse. I was poor, dirt poor. I convinced a friend of mine to let me sleep on his property. He had a plywood platform pitched on in this tree about 30 feet up. It was 2x4s nailed to a tree too. And boy,
Wow.
I could never get any dates to go up to my to my house up there. And one night a storm came along and it started rocking that tree back and forth. It was raining really hard. And my tent, I had this little dome tent. I couldn't stand up and it was really small, but I was able to sleep in it. And I had an extension cord running up there that I used for a radio. And the next morning, I decided my life had to change. I was coming home almost every night at 4 a.m. I was playing in a band. We were playing at bars. You know, in 20s, it was kind of glamorous and fun. But by the time I got into my 30s, and I think I was 30 years old, maybe 31 at the time, that way of living just was not fulfilling at all. And so I made a conscious decision at that point in time that I have to change. My life has to change. I just don't want to do this anymore. And I was a handyman, actually a carpenter, and I was doing some work. I had a project I was running at the time, but I had the opportunity to do a family reunion in Chicago, and so I came up to Chicago for Christmas. And I didn't own a coat. It was too expensive. I didn't need one in Florida. I didn't own a winter coat. And my plan was to go see all these blues bands. And so I get up there and it was 60 below wind chill, far too cold to be walking around downtown Chicago. And my brother was running the construction crew at Nightingale Conant. He was remodeling it. And I asked him if he would put me to work for a week. And he did. And that's when I popped in. I asked the manager of the department if I could listen to their best-selling program, and that was The Psychology of Winning by Dennis Waitley. And that program literally flipped a switch in my mind. That program, The Psychology of Winning, it was amazing. I had learned things that I'd never heard before: self-esteem, goal setting, self-image. They were all really in alignment with the things I had been learning from the non-judgment. And I've always been a very curious guy. I'd read many of the religious books out there, if not all the way through, certainly part way through all of them, I think. And I was never a religious guy, but always a spiritual guy. And the distinction for me is, I believe in something greater than, I think there's something that connects us all. So anyway, I then immediately followed that program up with The Psychology of Achievement by Brian Tracy, and who happens to be one of my favorite authors. I love that guy. And anyway, one thing led to the next. I became a student of the product. I got a job offer at Nightingale Conant in the manufacturing department. I wasn't qualified, but I think the manager recognized my enthusiasm. I mean, literally, I lit up while I was working, and he noticed my, the pep in my step, I guess. And he hired me in the manufacturing department, and I started applying the things I learned. I really consider myself a lifetime student. I still, to this day, I love to learn things that make my life better. And I feel after all these years, it's helping people improve their own lives that improves my life, if that makes any sense. You get what you give, I think, and that's certainly been my experience. Anyway, I used non-judgment through the course of my career at Nightingale Conant, and because of that, people wanted to help me. That I got along with everybody for the most part. There was a few jealous people because I was advancing so rapidly, and I think one of the most important things I learned in terms of business itself was I came to it. There was a situation where one guy, he just was always knocking me, and we had these manager meetings, and there was a flaw in his department, and it wasn't my department, it wasn't my business. And I'd mentioned, have you thought of trying this? There was a recurring problem that kept coming up in that department. And, he just laughed at me and then joked to the guy next to him, what an idiot. And so I pulled him aside. a couple of days later and said, I really think this would work. And, and he just disregarded me. So I finally went to his boss and I said, I think if we implemented this issue, this solution, it would really solve this problem. And he and his boss insisted it happen. And but right prior to going to the boss, I had to make the decision: what's more important to me, to help the company or to not alienate people? I had to quit caring what people thought about me. And that was a major decision in my life. And it was really, a powerful one, because I was really faced very clearly with, do I want people to like me, or do I want to help the business? And it was a clear choice. And I made the choice very quickly. I said, I want to help the company. It was really interesting how quickly I was able to embrace that concept, because by the time I had gotten to his boss, I didn't care about the repercussions. The guy never liked me again. He always gave me a hard time. He eventually left the company, and I got advanced to the CEO. And that's pretty much my story at Nightingale Conant and what led me up to Nightingale.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack right there.
I love
Gary,
it.
that is great. But what jumps off the page at me immediately is that your enthusiasm was contagious. Like, even to the people above you, and maybe not all, obviously, with the guy that wasn't going to give you your creds, even with a great idea, but clearly others thought that was a great idea. And then I love just delineating, okay, am I going to be likable to everybody, or am I going to really protect the company? When you had a low stake in doing that at the time. And I think that those are two things that really were pronounced in that story to me.
And my takeaway from it is that you were willing to let go of your judgment of others while realizing you would still be judged.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well put.
And that is, that's the truth we live in. We can create our own truth. We can't create how other people think and feel and behave, but we can create our own truth and how we deal with that and how we present ourselves to the world. Fascinating stuff. Now, I know you're also very enmeshed in the Napoleon Hill Institute as well. Tell us how long ago you started working with that institute or foundation and what you're doing there.
Okay, sure. Well, while I was at Nightingale Conant, we took over the marketing to their list, because they're a company. The Napoleon Hill Foundation is a company that licenses exclusively. They weren't marketers. And Nightingale was the best in the industry at marketing. And that's really kind of where I eventually settled. I have hours and hours of stories, but I ended up in the marketing department eventually. And that's really where I found my footing. I was passionate about it. I loved writing headlines. I loved copy. I loved working with creative people, hiring copywriters that were so much smarter than me. The whole process was tremendous. So we took over Napoleon Hill's marketing for a while. I formed that relationship with them then. And when I retired, I reached out to them and asked if I could license some content from them. And sell it through a website. And so that's what I did. And so I've stayed close to them. Don Green, two of my favorite people in the whole wide world are Rick Conant and Don Green. And if you ever have the opportunity to interview Don Green, I highly encourage you to. He's a spectacular human being, wonderful, very bright man. And he has just done so well for the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Now, there's another company that licensed rights to Napoleon Hill coaching, and that was the Napoleon Hill Institute. And that's a different organization, independent. They were kind of like me. They were a licensor of content. And they sell certification, coaching certification. And so to become a Napoleon Hill certified coach, you go through that organization. And I've actually been training their clients to become good coaches. And that's been a real joy for me, because it's kind of right back to teaching and learning. In order to give a good presentation, every Thursday I teach a class for about an hour and a half. And in order to do that, I do a lot of prep work. I do a lot of research. I want to make sure I always bring value to the conversation. I'm not really happy with rehashing the same content over and over again. I'm always diving into new stuff. And one really neat thing that I discovered, and this is really, really interesting. I was watching a YouTube short, and this young gal who was so bright, she made this very short statement that on the other side of your consistent conflicts lies something you value that's working against your own best interests. And that blew my mind. And wow. The depth of that, I mean, I went down a rabbit hole in terms of values. And I made some big decisions that changed because it's taken me a lifetime to realize that peace of mind is my only goal, is my single most important goal. And it's something I was taught a long time ago. I never believed it, of course. I pursued the fancy cars and the properties all over the world. And there was a zillion things I thought, would give me what I want. And there's certainly nothing wrong with pursuing wealth and pursuing riches, not at all. But for me, I was fooling myself to think that would bring me lasting satisfaction and lasting gratitude. And so not too long after I retired, I decided, look, peace of mind is my only goal. And then when I ran across this value statement, I started making sure that every decision I made supported peace of mind as my only goal. And that concept of analyzing what I valued and looking deeply at the things I valued that were working against my own best interests, I quickly made some major changes. For example, I've been a drummer since the 80s and 70s even. And I stepped away from it for a long time, for the most of my career at Nightingale Conant, but I picked it up again in my late 50s, early 60s. And I was playing in a couple bands, and I was playing in this jazz band, which was a very aggressive step for a blues player. And I was learning a lot. These guys could plop down a new song and read sheet music. I don't know how to read sheet music, so I had to memorize things. And, I was going at a mad pace. And we were gigging. We were doing a lot of gigs. But it was just so much work for me that I realized this is not supporting my peace of mind. And, there were some business deals that I backed away from because of that change. But anyway, this whole concept of on the other side of your consistent conflicts is some value you're holding that's working against your own best interest. I thought that was extremely interesting and very powerful.
Like what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button and learn how you can change how you're seen and charge what you're worth. Extremely.
It's extremely, it actually speaks to me with things that can identify with in my business that, I was wanting a certain goal, like maybe camaraderie in the business, or, a cohesiveness between team members that would grow. And yet I warred against that at every turn. And I caught myself doing it not so long ago. And so that really speaks to me, because I was really the one standing in the way of the very thing that I wanted. So.
Which is usually the case, right? We like to stand in our own way a lot.
We do. We certainly do. Well, that's a great segue, Gary, into this next section where, when we first talked, you said, I'd really like to talk about the 4 things that I have learned in life, and I call them the foundation of life.
Yes.
And it's a great segue into that. Please take us down that journey and tell us about those 4 things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I feel like people are like buildings, right? The flaws in a foundation in a building can have a ripple effect in the entire building. If a foundation is shifted, it can become damaged. That movement can weaken the structure of the building. Well, we have a psychological foundation that's very similar to that. And the foundation of life is really based on the 4 corners that I've defined. I came across this when I started working. No, I started mentoring actually. I was doing one-on-one mentoring when I left Nightingale Conant, and I have to say that that is the most fulfilling work I've ever done in my life, and that taught me that helping other people is really what brings me satisfaction. It's just really when you genuinely want to help people and you're not judging them, the emotional rewards are unbelievable, like the emotional rewards you get from non-judgment. So anyway, I in the process of mentoring, one of the things that I learned, and most of the people I were mentoring were between 30 and 45 maybe, so they were young professionals just looking to, and most of them were entrepreneurs, but some of them worked for companies. And one of the things that kept coming up over and over again was how much people beat themselves up. I have this list of questions I ask people when I'm mentoring, and they give me a really good insight into what makes them tick. And one of the questions I ask is basically about the nature of the relationship they have with themselves. And most of the people I talked to were very hard on themselves. And so the first corner of the foundation of life that I know for a fact is something that is helpful. I've learned it myself. I don't teach anything I don't practice and prove myself. I feel like I'm almost a scientist in life. I've always, I've got this mock frock coat that I put on, and I mix all these eyes together like in a laboratory, and I try them out. I test them on myself, and if they work, teach them. And so, this was something I learned early on. And the cornerstone of the foundation of life is love yourself. Learn to love yourself. If you can't love yourself, at least learn to appreciate who you are. Look, humans are flawed. That's just all there is to it. Every single human's flawed. I'm flawed. I'll be flawed tomorrow. I'll be flawed in 10 years. But that has to be okay. The reason it's so important to love yourself, or at least appreciate who you are, is because you're only going to be as happy and as successful as you believe you deserve to be. I'm going to repeat that because it's so important. You're only going to be as happy and successful as you believe you deserve to be. And if you're hard on yourself, if you think you're a bad person, or if you think you don't deserve things, you are going to self-sabotage things that can help you grow, make you learn, bring joy into your life. You've got to love yourself. You've got to appreciate yourself if you expect to have good things happen. So that's the number one corner of the foundation of life. The second one is learn to forgive. Forgiveness, in my mind, it's not a religious thing. It's not even a spiritual thing. It is the most powerful psychological tool we have at our disposal, because it allows us to free ourselves of the negative bonds of the past. And that, when we forgive, it severs those negative connections, and that lets us function perfectly in the moment, which is where all things happen. Your creativity, everything, problem solving, connections with people, all great accomplishments happen in the moment. You only think about the past, or you worry about the future. But being in the moment is the most important thing we can do. Such a valuable lesson that I learned was the lesson of meditation. I meditate every single day, and I did my entire career. And at first I avoided it, saying, well, I'm just too busy. I had kids, I had a career, and I was giving myself an excuse not to meditate. And I finally, I would take about a 20-minute shower in the morning, just to kind of chill and calm down. And I realized, that's when I can meditate. So I ended up plopping a chair down in the shower. And to me, meditation isn't thinking about flowers and sunshine and rainbows. Meditation is about stilling your mind. One of the things I love to tell people is shut up and listen. Be silent. Let let that silence get filled with inspiration. And we have this ego chatter that, and we all have experienced it, we know it, what happens constantly. We have this ego chatter that never stops. We pick up and we look at our phone constantly. So many of us, first thing in the morning, we're looking at our phone. We're preoccupying ourselves with TV, with the internet, with things that, even books, all of those are a form of escape. They're a form of trying to entertain our minds, right? But in reality, spending time in silence is just as important. It's so important to reflect and get that connection with who we are inside, not the external stuff, but our thoughts, our ability to think, our ability to focus. The greatest minds in the world, the Einsteins, the Teslas of the world, these were people that meditated in the morning. I mean, they had this ability to focus, and really meditation is nothing more than extreme focus. It's being in the now, where you realize, where you envision, where you see the answers. And that's what meditation should bring to you. So anyway, forgiveness, what it does is it allows you to get into the moment. You can use meditation to stay in the moment. It's such a powerful tool. And and you're not letting anybody off the hook when you forgive. It's a gift you give to yourself. You let go of the burdens of the pain. The way I like to encourage people, because when I was mentoring, there were so many individuals who had very harsh childhoods. There was it was, I heard some of the most horrifying stories. And I like to explain to people that, people that are abusive, for example, they were almost always, if not always, brought up in an environment that was abusive as well. And we tend to be a reflection of the environment we were raised in. And so abusive people come from an abusive environment, and they just became a product of the environment they were in. And their parents' parents were that same way too, so that way of thinking is a generational thing. So when you go back and you try to isolate one individual as being the culprit, as being the bad guy, you have to really step back and understand that that person went through some very hard things, and they just never learned the great things that we have access to now. We have everything at our fingertips. The internet has been such a blessing in terms of giving us the ability to tap into almost anything. And so, when we look at forgiveness, we just have to understand that people are flawed, people are abused, and that gets passed down. And we don't have to let them off the hook. We don't have to verbally say anything to anybody to forgive. That's all done in our own heart. It's all done in our own mind. But it frees us from a painful past and allows us to be in the moment. The third corner of the foundation is don't judge. It burns a hole in us. It limits our ability to connect with people. It is so limiting. It emotionally burdens us. It's interesting how in this day and age, we tend to believe things that people tell us, right? With no evidence. I remember there was a point in my life in Houston when I was, this was well before my conversation with my sister. I was in junior high, I think. The girl down the street invited me over to her house, and I went over there one time, and there was a little bit of flirting that went on, but I was too young and innocent to do anything, and so that was the end of it. But then she invited me to a party, and her ex-boyfriend came up to me and picked a fight with me because he accused me of stealing her from him. And I was a young guy but scrappy, and we wrestled a little bit, and I held him down and pinned him. And but his older cousin was there, and his older cousin made it a point to get even for his cousin. Now, I don't know what information was planted in that cousin's head, but he literally came after me with a tire iron. He tried to run me over with a car at one point. I mean, he was literally trying to hurt me really bad or kill me. I don't know which. And thank God we moved to Sarasota, Florida, not too long after that. So, but it was just a good example of how information that isn't carefully analyzed, validate the things people say, and particularly on the internet these days, people make claims that just are not right, they're not true, and people develop these judgments based on unfounded information. So judgment, don't judge. It doesn't help. I know people will argue this and say that, oh no, you got to judge people. My experience has been, when you don't judge, when you can discipline yourself to catch yourself, to think about it, to ponder the judgments you want to pass on other people, the truth of the matter is there's no benefit to you in doing that. It just is a way that we self-sabotage ourselves. So that's the third corner of the foundation of life. And the final is bring intention to the other three. Bring intention. Don't just say, this is a neat idea. I think about it. I insist that the people I mentor make it their number one goal to love themselves, to learn to forgive, and to learn to not judge. They are the most important things you can do as a human being, in my mind. And I've proven it, and I've tested it through all the people that I've mentored. I mean, I've had people's lives completely transform in such a short period of time. The people I've mentored have come back to me, and Gary, it's almost, one lady, as a matter of fact, said, I wasn't prepared for how quickly things changed and improved. I'd been, and this was a woman that was abused as a young girl. And she said, I wasn't prepared for how quickly things would change. And it took me a while to deal with it. But the truth of the matter is, if you make these things your number one goal, it sets that foundation for all the business success, the financial success, the relationship success, the health that you want in your life. Without making these things important goals in your lives, I believe, and I've seen time and time again, that you will end up sabotaging yourself in some form or fashion. So there you have it.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't agree with you more about every point. I definitely agree with all of that.
And they are foundational.
They are
absolutely
definitely foundational.
It's spot on, Gary. Your message today is so inspiring. I mean, I can definitely see why everybody loves you so much.
Yeah. and from treehouse to CEO,
yeah,
that's awesome. And you can see that those
is.
life lessons applied definitely work for the success, and peace of mind, right? I think that if we bring it around full circle, because at the end of the day, wealth, whatever you consider that to be, and success, whatever a person considers that to be or whatnot, if you obtain those things without peace of mind, you really haven't obtained anything.
Yeah, well, you just move on. You keep looking, right? It's an inner search for the thing that you think is going to make you feel good. And I've found that the thing that makes me feel good consistently is being a lifelong student and teaching things that legitimately help. Like this recent lesson I learned about questioning your values. Right now, I'm working on a thing about fear, how to overcome fear, and I'm in the middle of that, and it's really fascinating. It's an interesting and deep dive. But the point being that when you work to help other people improve themselves, you just get improved right along with them. Your life becomes better when you help other people live a better life.
Agreed.
Oh, that's
agreed.
So, I want to kind of end with this message, because it speaks so much to me today to have you here, especially after the conversation I just had this morning with a young man who has a product and a service to sell. And he was very, not so much loving himself, right? And he asked me, he said, Tanya, how do you guys do every day what you do and stay excited about it? And how can you talk about it every day with such energy? And I said to him, look, I said, it's because it just goes back to seeing people grow and getting them to understand there's something special inside of them. Somebody asked me a long time ago, hey, make me a star. And I said to them, we don't make stars, we unveil them.
There you go.
And unveiling those stars is something that you never get tired of. I said, find in your heart what really moves you and what makes you feel good about yourself. And as long as you're doing it for other people, you're going to continue feeling good about yourself for the rest of your life.
Every day.
Right. So I appreciate your message so much, Gary. Thank you for spending time with us today. We're so honored to have you here. And we hope that you'll consider coming back again to Be Bold Branding.
I would love to. I appreciate the invite, and I appreciate the opportunity very much.
You bet. Now, how will people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about either Nightingale Conant or the Napoleon Hill Institute?
Or
your coaching, your mentoring.
Yeah, you can certainly go to nightingale.com. There is a wealth of incredible content there, and very inexpensive to get an education of a lifetime. The same is true at naphill.org. There's also the Napoleon Hill Institute.com, which is where you can go if you want to become a certified Napoleon Hill coach. And I have a website called greatlifementors.com. And there I have licensed content from Napoleon Hill, as well as a one-on-one personal mentoring. And I don't charge very much because I don't do this for the money. I do this for the benefits. I'm a selfish guy. I like helping people because it makes me feel good. So
you just proved that. You just proved that. We just talked about that. It is, if you can help other people, it just makes you feel good.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah.
There's no substitute for it.
I think we share the passion for what we do. And I think that's such an important part of success, is that if you're not passionate about what you do, either find a way to be passionate or switch to something you are passionate about.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you again, Gary. We look forward to having you back.
All right. Well, thanks again. And it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Ready to change how you're seen and charge what you're worth? If you're not getting enough opportunities to meet with ideal customers, or the prospects you're meeting with just aren't ideal, it's most likely your brand that's holding you back. So if you're a coach, consultant, or expert who is on the rise, you need our ultimate guide to a freedom-based brand. Download it free now at brandfaceguide.com.